Hi, welcome to Compositium, a channel dedicated to composition and orchestration. As I mentioned last week, this video will be about the orchestration of another piece by Ludwig van Beethoven, the third movement of his first piano sonata, only this time for the woodwind section of the orchestra. If you don't know the piece, it would be a good idea to listen to it first, so I'll leave a link in the description below. Just pause this video for a moment, listen to it, and then come back here to see how I've orchestrated it for woodwinds. Of course, the first thing I did, as I explained in the first video of this series, was to create a vocal score, that is, a score that develops a 4-part harmony scheme from the piece, and here it is. Now we have to take into account everything that I mentioned in my previous video. We don't want something that looks like this, but rather like this. So, with that in mind, let me show you what I did. The first 4 measures are very simple, 2 voices on clarinets and 2 on bassoons. I've also doubled the first voice on a flute so that it stands out a little more than the rest. I could have done the same with an oboe, but the color of the oboe is a bit dark in this register and clashes with the character of the music, in my opinion. The next phrase is a repetition of the first one, a minor third up. So to make the music more interesting, I changed the orchestration a bit. I keep the bassoons in the second clarinet, but the melody is now in the instrument that I avoided in the first phrase, the oboe. The next 2 measures are marked forte, so I engage the whole ensemble to get as much contrast as possible. Each voice is in octaves between different instruments. Also, take a look at the registers. Flutes are used in their high register because that is where they can play a real forte. The other instruments are well placed, with the exception perhaps of the first bassoon, but it's double in the second, so there's no problem. Also, orchestrations can never be perfect. We always have to make some compromises. Now we return to soft dynamics, and since the music repeats the same idea twice, with a slight difference, I use 2 different groups of instruments in each. First oboes and bassoons, then flutes and clarinets. As I mentioned in my previous video, this will create the effect of a dialogue, which is a very cool feature in an orchestration that cannot be done in a solo instrument, such as the piano. I could have orchestrated the repetition of this section differently, but I preferred not to, and have kept the repeat bar line. The next phrase begins piano, and makes a crescendo to mezzo forte. I start with oboes and clarinets, a combination that I haven't used yet. Then, in the third measure, I suddenly engage the whole ensemble again. This is totally unexpected and will create a strong contrast, something that Beethoven was very prone to do. The music goes back to piano, so I remove some instruments, but instead of doing that with the ones that have just entered, I do it with the ones that started the phrase. In this way, I change the color of the orchestration and go back to the combination that finished the first section, which, by the way, also presents the same idea. This idea is repeated again, so I change the orchestration once more, clarinets and bassoons. The next 2 measures repeat the last beat of the idea, so I also orchestrate each one in a different way. The following measures contain a single voice in different octaves, and since they are marked fortissimo, I need to engage the whole ensemble once more. Look at what happens at the end of measure 27. The flutes go into their middle register, where they can't play forte, in absolute dynamics, that is. But they have been supported by an oboe the entire time, and the second oboe joins them at this point to give a little extra support. The second clarinet does the same thing as the second oboe, but for a different reason. It can't play those notes 1 octave lower. The music continues with strong dynamics, but I decide to use only 4 instruments. After all, there's no rule that says that we have to use all of them when the dynamics are strong. Also, in this way I let the orchestration breathe, so to speak, because the next phrase will involve all the instruments again. Notice how I change the color of the melody slightly midway. First, there are 2 flutes and a clarinet, but the latter is replaced by an oboe at measure 32. In measures 35 to 38, we have 2 new repetitions of the idea that concluded the first section, and also appeared in measures 19 to 22. Are there any combinations I haven't used for this idea? Yes, there are actually two: oboes plus clarinets and flutes plus bassoons, so I used them both. Finally, to close the section, I changed the orchestration once again, to clarinets and bassoons. Usually, I see my students double some voices an octave up with flutes and oboes, but I considered this to be a mistake. In my opinion, Beethoven wants a darker sound here. That's why he goes to the low register. Doubling the music an octave up will make it shine, which is clearly not what he wanted. That's all for now. I hope this video has been helpful to you in understanding how to orchestrate for the woodwind section of the orchestra. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll take a 2-week break to enjoy the holidays and we'll be back in the first week of January. Until then, take care. Ciao.